Belgrade and University Lumière Lyon in France, and on the Department of Cultural Policy and Management of Culture. And my research was actually called Redefined Silk Roads, Potentials of Cultural Exchange between Serbia and PR China. The title was inspired by the UNESCO project Integral Study of the Silk Roads, held between 1988 and 1997, that was exploring the intellectual and cultural and artistic exchanges that were conducted through the Silk Roads, and put in the contemporary time, in an informational age, what would be the Silk Roads of today, when we are no longer limited by geographical features, but we are experiencing endless virtual possibilities of cultural and intellectual exchanges. So speaking about the cultural diplomacy in general, there are many definitions depending on the country of origin and the author, but roughly speaking, shortly, the definition of cultural diplomacy is the use of culture and art for the purpose of development of international relations. In the American model of cultural diplomacy, for example, of the author Ruth Barrison, it is an immense source of power capable of shaping, changing, and influencing the perceptions of public communities. Or by Milton S. Cummings from the Institute of Cultural Diplomacy in Berlin, it is the exchange of ideas, information, value systems, tradition, beliefs, and other aspects of culture with the intention of fostering mutual understanding. Cultural diplomacy came into use as a phrase in the terminology in the mid-60s of the 20th century in the USA, but it is of course a much older phenomenon, started with France and other countries such as Great Britain, Germany, Netherlands, Spain, mainly colonial powers that had to use culture as a way of creating international dialogues with the countries that were colonialized. Different vocabulary is used for cultural diplomacy depending on the country. So cultural diplomacy is typical for France and Greece, while, for example, in Australia, Canada, Singapore, international cultural relations is more common, or simply cultural exchange in Japan and America. The goals and objectives of cultural diplomacy, the principal objective is to positively influence the public in general and high-level opinion in foreign state. So its aim is to work on two levels. One is the general public, the wide audience, and the other one is the high officials and the authorities of the country. Cultural diplomacy is defined as a subcategory of public diplomacy, which means that public diplomacy includes a wider range of diplomatic contents and media, first of all, while cultural diplomacy is focused on culture and art as a core of diplomatic action. Cultural diplomacy in China. First, we can portray the Chinese cultural system, which is exercising the cultural diplomacy. It is, of course, the grade 1 system with multi-levels, and in charge of cultural exchange is, again, the National People's Congress and Standing Committee exercising the Constitution. And the main institution is the Ministry of Culture, which is in charge of the division of cultural organizations, which are divided into cultural administrative organs, cultural institutions, cultural enterprise, and the social organizations. The main law which is in charge of international cultural exchanges is the Regulation on Foreign Cultural and Artistic Performances and Exhibitions from 1997, the law which is stipulating the conditions under which cultural exchanges are possible and defining the strategies of development of cultural exchange. The tools of Chinese cultural diplomacy are, firstly, of course, language as a tool of cultural diplomacy, academic exchange, then the classical bilateral and multilateral agreements on cultural exchange with foreign countries, Confucius Institutes, and the cultural industry market. Language as a tool of cultural diplomacy and academic exchange are, of course, an old method of creating informal ambassadors in formal countries, which are the learners of the target language. So by fostering learning the language of our country and fostering academic exchange, we directly implement the informal ambassadors of the country and supporters of the country in general. The classical bilateral and multilateral agreements are more or less, when it comes to China and foreign countries, are repetitive form after the Second World War. Mainly when it started, it's normally 6 to 8 years agreement, which is just being repeated, maybe amended in some points, and it's focused mainly on mainstream blockbuster exhibitions, large projects, and traditional art and culture in general, while Confucius Institutes have a more diversified approach to cultural exchange. And of course the cultural industry as a very important platform both for cultural diplomacy and the development of economy in culture, because it is at the same time a powerful tool of public diplomacy, and on the other hand it's a vast potential for economic development in the cultural products market. So the aims of cultural diplomacy in China would be, in first place, reshaping the threatening image. After the international survey in 1999, held among many countries in Asia and Europe, China was perceived as a country which is on the first place, a country of unique culture, predominant to the country that is a threatening economic and political power. So, to use the image of a culturally unique country that can be stronger than the image of threatening power would be the task of Chinese cultural diplomacy, and of course, as I said, the creation of brand names in external cultural exchanges, therefore overcoming the deficit in exportation of cultural products compared to the importation, especially from the United States. The term connected to Chinese cultural diplomacy, of course, is soft power. It is the term established by Joseph Nye in 1988 in the famous article Public Diplomacy and Cultural Exchange. And briefly, soft power is the ability to get what you want through attraction rather than coercion or payment. So, in the opposition to hard power, it uses one nation's cultural heritage, artistic heritage, political persuasion, ideology, cultural appeal in the world to struggle to win hearts and minds as opposed to hard power. So the main weapon of soft power would be cultural and artistic exchange. Defined in Chinese foreign policy, culture is the third pillar of Chinese diplomacy, and it's closely connected to the idea of Chinese peaceful development. And the very problematic terminology about 中国和平崛起 compared to 中国和平发展 contains in itself the idea of soft power, or projecting the image of soft development through and using the culture as a platform of universal values to create international dialogues. Former Chinese Minister of Culture Song Jia-zheng was the politician very important for the development of Chinese cultural diplomacy, because he was the one to truly emphasize the importance of cultural and international relations in the 21st century. And Chinese Communist Party 11 5-year plan calls for a larger presence of China at the international cultural market. So, as we said, soft power is attraction versus force. So, it is a way, as Joseph Nye defined, to make people want what you want without imposing and without interfering with their free will. So, we cannot escape but not noticing the parallels between the Chinese traditional, some Chinese traditional philosophical thoughts and the concept of soft power as a way to attract and not to impose. So if we take the translation of the 73rd chapter of Tao Te Ching, if we take this translation, that it's heaven's way to conquer without striving, to induce the people to come without summoning, to act according to plans without haste, or it makes things obey without giving orders, it makes them come without calling them, it brings everything to its conclusions whilst having the appearance of letting everything drag. So we can find a parallel between the Chinese traditional philosophical thought and the contemporary concept of soft power, of creating the development and promoting universal values which would attract the general public and not impose them. And the combination of soft power with harmoniously delegated hard power will create smart power. Art and culture as tools of international politics are also very old idea in the history of civilization. Its roots can be tracked with Alexander the Great and his Roman successors, which were the first to use the artistic artifacts to implement them in foreign countries in order to express the might of their empire. And but the definition and the very mechanism of use of art in international politics is connected to the Cold War and USA-USSR relations, and in USA-China relations. And we can just analyze this mechanism through two examples of two exhibitions held in the USA. One is 1973-74, the other one is 1979. The first exhibition was held, the initiator was Henry Kissinger, and the idea was to anticipate Nixon's visit to China and the later recognition of the state by calling for an organization of an exhibition of Chinese archaeological artifacts in the USA. And then if we analyze the content of this exhibition, it's of course a blockbuster exhibition. It was the insurance was $50 million, and it was a large-scale exhibition. The aim was to reach a very wide audience in the USA. It visited San Francisco Museum, and then New York, Chicago, some other cities, but also Kansas City, because the aim was to reach the heartland of the American people. And the content of the exhibition were the archaeological artifacts excavated by the Chinese communist archaeologists. But the message was, in a way, to show first of all, to express the Marxist theory of historic development, and to, in a way, symbolically show the current regime in PRC at the time. And there was a large media coverage, and the commentaries in media were often expressing how the exhibition shows the greatness, the might of the current social system in China. And it was not an exhibition that targeted scientists or experts in this field. So all the experts at that time remained silent when it comes to comments to this exhibition. But then in 1979, after the situation was changed, Deng Xiaoping's visit to PRC and the recognition of Deng Xiaoping's regime in mainland China, there was another exhibition, again of archaeological artifacts, but this time, as Deng Xiaoping criticized the idea of cultural exchange as blockbuster mainstream exhibition with implicit political messages, the exhibition was targeting experts in Asian studies, in archaeology and art, and the article in New York Times stated that this exhibition is not at all an exhibition for unprepared spectators who are not familiar with the subject of the exhibition. So art is a carrier of symbolic messages. The symbolic message can vary from expressing one country's might to expressing the healed international relations, or as a call for healing of the international relations. I made this chart when I did a research on possibilities of cultural exchange between Serbia and China, but it can be used in a general way to show how cultural, political, and economic exchange can together create a sustainable chain and influence each other, and we can use it to see what role can cultural exchange have in the domain of in the total of relations between two countries. So, for example, if the cultural exchange can beneficially influence can be used to attract investments and to foster cultural tourism, for example, or products of cultural industry, then economical exchange can be beneficial for cultural exchange through, for example, fostering artistic excellency through competitions, investments in cultural industry, and so on. Then cultural exchange can contribute, for example, can bring an increasing presence in foreign media for one country. And then the political relations and the political exchange can be important for stipulating the legislation context for cultural exchange. And the aim of my my research was to see what role can cultural exchange have for the development of total of relations. Then we can use the example of the Socialist Federative Republic of Yugoslavia and People's Republic of China. If we do a comparative analysis of cultural and political relations to see how sometimes cultural exchanges anticipate the changes in political environment, and more often the cultural exchanges are the demonstrations of the changes in the environment of political relations. So, for example, after the Yugoslavia's acknowledgement of PR China, the first cultural exchange program was held, Beijing Opera and Choral Assembly in China. Then after the first ambassadors were exchanged, the week of Yugoslav cinema was held in PRC. Then after the Hungarian incident in 1958, when the Yugoslav ambassador left China in 1968 when anti-Yugoslav campaign started, the visit of the Chinese art troupe in Yugoslavia had an alleged bad reception, and the media coverage of this event was expressing that the audience had a very bad reception of Chinese art and Chinese culture and so on. Then, if we see 1963, the Cathedral of Serbo-Croatian Language opened in Beijing, which anticipated 1964 when the new Chinese ambassador was appointed in Yugoslavia. Then the period of very frequent exchange of films was another period of cultural exchange which anticipated the visit of Josip Broz Tito to PR China and so on. So there are many examples where we can see how one influences another, how cultural exchanges can in some cases trigger the changes in political relations and the other way around, and how projects of cultural exchange can be the demonstrations of the intentions in political relations. So speaking about Yugoslavia and China and their cultural relations, the biggest project of cultural exchange between them was, of course, in the field of cinematography. And it is interesting that the film exchange survived even through some problematic periods of international relations between Yugoslavia and China from 1956 to 1977. And the reasons for this would be probably that the Chinese film industry had a deficit and had a need for importation, and then again Yugoslav films had a convenient political matrix, so they could match in that way. And both Yugoslavia and China evaluated film as the most convenient informational propagandistic measure, and the Agency of Exportation and Importation of Films in Yugoslavia and China Film Distribution Company were in charge of creating this cultural market. So at that time, and it is still a topic which we could discuss, film is and was a cost-effective, powerful transmitter of cultural information. And as we all know, those who are from Yugoslavia, or former Yugoslavia, that Velimir Bata-Živinović, the actor from the film Walter Defends Sarajevo, did more for cultural diplomacy of Yugoslavia and the countries that are now former Yugoslavia than all the efforts of the foreign ministries of culture, ministries of foreign affairs. So this again shows what is the potential and what can be the power of the cultural product exported in another country. What effect can it have, considering that this was maybe 30, 40 years ago, and how a cultural message can be powerful. And I would like to, I would like to play a short insert, just to see how. Mitya, can you help me? Oh. From the movie Walter Defends Sarajevo. I don't think he can. Where we can see the Yugoslav actors Velimir Bata-Živinović and Ljubiša Samardžić. And this is Velimir Bata-Živinović visiting China when a couple of million people waited for him at the Beijing airport. eager to meet the hero of the film. And this is Walter giving a speech. So there are different theories why Walter depicts Sarajevo became so popular in China and what is the background of this phenomenon. But one of them is that Walter represented the metaphor of the charismatic leader, which is not one person, but which is in the spirit of a nation. As in the film, Walter is not only a character, but the whole city of Sarajevo and the whole spirit of the partisan movement and so on. So the Chinese audience could relate to this idea of the charismatic leader and of the idea of the charismatic leader, which is within all of us. And so, speaking of Chinese cultural diplomacy, there are controversies and potential of this approach. Confucius Institutes are already under suspicion in some countries such as Sweden, Canada and India, already are accused in a way for propagandistic activities, while the Chinese side is defending themselves by not seeing the difference between Alliance Française, the Goethe Institute, Russian Dome, or other foreign cultural centers and the Confucius Institutes in terms of content, strategies, intentions, aims, and so on. What could be the obstacles of Chinese cultural diplomacy and the possible risks and the possible lacks of this approach? First of all, cultural content and artistic quality can suffer because it is shaped by the demands of cultural diplomacy. Then it can represent a stereotyped Chinese culture. Then there is a problem, of course, of translation, of transcription of cultural concepts to other countries. Then there is the problem of over-promotion of traditional culture, domination of public sector, censorship issues, and so on. On the other hand, Chinese cultural diplomacy can be important if used in a proper way to create peace and stability. Also, it's a carrier of aesthetic and educational values, enrichment of cultural offer in foreign countries. Then it can foster cultural tourism, promote economical collaboration, help in overcoming cross-cultural differences, difficulties in the business sector. Also, Chinese cultural diplomacy and the way the cultural exchange is performed can help for better assimilation of Chinese communities in case it really is used as a platform for international dialogue, but it can also be an obstacle for Chinese communities to relate to local communities in case it is performed in a rigid way, in case the suspicion towards, for example, Confucius Institute is too strong, and the cultural exchange and cultural diplomacy only doesn't succeed to project the image of peaceful development, but even underlines the threatening image in a way. So it is not the question in the end, is the Chinese cultural diplomacy or cultural diplomacy and public diplomacy in general inherently a good or bad thing, but what are the ways, the strategies, the contents and the actors of this idea that will decide what will be the outcomes. And for foreign cultural experts and Chinese cultural advisors and Chinese cultural attachés perceive a civil sector as an important part of future cultural exchanges. Because it can be a very important complement to the public sector, and it can introduce a larger democratization of ideas, of contents, of actors within the exchanges with foreign countries. At the moment, the civil sector can be registered as social organizations, 社会团体, privately run non-enterprise units and foundations, and as we probably know, they are obliged to be co-administrated with another governmental body. This is stipulated by the Social Organizations Registration and Administration Act. But recently this act was amended, so there is a certain allowance for independent NGOs to be registered. And this is evaluated to be the possible future carrier of important changes in Chinese international relations. So this would bring the very necessary diversifications of sources of cultural and exchange in general. So, thank you for your attention, and this would be the presentation that I have made, and I'm open for any questions if you have any. Yes?
We understand that in 2006, in Belgrade, your university, probably China, this Confucius Institute was established.
Yes, it was established in 2006.
Yeah. And you have also mentioned that in Canada, Sweden, and in India, these institutes are not very welcome. People suspect them.
There was a level of suspicion, yes.
In India, in fact, Chinese government and the embassy has tried a law that Confucius Institute in at least one of the university could be opened. They donated a lot, but eventually it has been not opened. And the main cause is use of Confucius Institute as a soft power, which you have also mentioned. Is there any kind of real suspicion in your university or by your government? Because we know...
well, yes, I will try to answer this question. But, you know, it's specific, the relations of former Yugoslavia and Serbia now with China. I can say that the general public is, how to say, there is a positive reception of Chinese development. Therefore, there was no suspicion towards the Chinese Cultural Center, or not any more than towards any other foreign cultural center. I can say that the larger suspicion in our country is brought for a British Council. This was the biggest issue, which was suspected for espionage and some other activities, even closed for some period. But the Chinese Cultural Center, also because of its activities, because right now, my colleague Vladimir, he is working in Confucius Institute Belgrade, so maybe he can tell you more about that. But the activities are, it's not a very, how to say, visible foreign cultural centers, as is the French cultural centers or Cervantes Institute and so on. So the activities are quite small, and it's just a growing institution without any imposing programs or anything that would really draw suspicion. And can you tell us something about India? What was the... Why is it different from the Alliance Française or any other foreign cultural center? Why was it perceived in a different way?
Well, I was directly involved with the Confucius Institute set up in India, to some extent, because first of all, they tried to my university, University of Delhi, where I was working as associate professor. Initially, the language, because see, in India what is happening is, there are language teachers who teach Chinese language and literature and culture. And there are a group who do not know any Chinese. They work on China. Unfortunately, they do not know any Chinese, but they are China expert. And because they have got good connection with the government of India, with foreign ministry and all, because they are top senior professors, the government of India listens to them. It was accused, as we know that in IT sectors in India, like in Hyderabad and Bangalore, there were many Chinese engineers who were working there. And Indian government found that some of them were involved in espionage. Because through IT, they are masters, they know technology, they could track all this kind of information bureau and intelligence credentials.
I have a counter-argument. I'm from Poznań, from Poland, and the Confucius Institute in my city was established by my friends, by sort of people who are very interested in Chinese culture, from Chinese philology, and it works like a little of family cultural enterprise. But on the contrary, there are a couple of examples, as you said, that people are not very positive, or they don't have positive attitude about the Confucius. But I have a different question. You've been analyzing, actually it refers to your research, you've been analyzing the periods the communist times, stealing from, I don't remember what was the year, in a quite fluent way from a couple of events, as if it wasn't a historical period characteristic for all Eastern Europe. My question refers, do you know if there were similar relations, diplomatic relations between China and the Czech Republic on the cultural level as well? And the second question is about the NGO. I'm not quite sure if what you have just said is really, how to say it, it's well established, because I note from the different sort of publication that NGO in China are sort of suppressed, so the Chinese government accepts only NGOs with a very large budget, just to avoid potential opposition from small institutions which are not under control. So yes, I have two remarks.
Sure. Well, for the first question, I was doing a research on Yugoslavia-China relations, and especially cultural relations. And as I was working within the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in Serbia, I was researching the archives of these two countries. So I'm not familiar with Czech Republic or Czechoslovakia in that terms. They were in some parts it was mentioned, but I didn't really follow and research the whole history.
Because it was a question of ideology, yes.
The question, yes. But as you know, it was specific, so it was different, I think, from country to country. And for your second question, I use this more as a question, because I put it as a last slide, because it's more like a potential for future development. And as I did some interviews for my thesis with cultural attachés, Chinese cultural attachés, and they put answers in the interview that they trust in the civil sector as the future carrier of cultural exchanges.
So the majority of data comes from Chinese diplomacy? The majority of the data used for your research comes from the Chinese diplomacy, doesn't it?
I combined in my country what I found, and also the Chinese resources, also some other French literature also. So maybe we can speak with Chinese professors, what is their opinion about the development of Chinese NGOs.
To kick this ball to me.
Because this is what I said, it's theoretical. It's just, I'm not speaking from practice. So maybe you are more the practice of the existence of Chinese civil sector. And what is the future of Chinese civil sector in your opinion?
There are some NGOs in China, but not so developed as here. Not so developed. And actually, I don't know why a lot of people believe Chinese government control this. I don't know why, because there is no law about it.
Yeah,
it's just there's no law like this forbidden. No.
No. It's not a law for. It's not a law for forbidding.
There is a law.
But it means they try to limit it. So if you have a lot of money and you are very rich, you have to have. But if you are a small organization,
I know a news. This is a policy. It's like if the NGO in China, which is in China, gets some big amount US dollar, like foreign currency, and they have to register in Chinese foreign currency department and have to tell where it comes from. Because, in my opinion, in my personal opinion, many NGOs are very good to do a lot of good things in China, but really it exists, it hides. There are some NGOs, they get money from American Parliament or American government and they try to do something to separate China. Really, there are some, but very few. Very few. Many, I think most are very good. Yeah, most are very good. But sometimes it's difficult to tell where the money come from,
Yeah.
Even Chinese people's company, we don't know where the money come from. Difficult.
They are not at all forbidden. They are just obliged to be co-administrated with the governmental bodies. Or in some
This
cases,
policy is open. It's open and obvious. It's open and tell everyone. If there is amount, it's like I think if it's more than hundreds of thousands of dollars, get this money once, have to register.
yes. So they are controlled in a way. Yes.
Yeah. They just. If the NGOs don't do this sort of thing, don't get connected with the American Parliament, I think nobody cares.
They are under surveillance.
Yeah.
But still, it's a paradox. But still, they are seen as the future carrier of some important changes.
Yeah. But
Not
in
by
my
foreign media, but by the Chinese.
in my personal view, it's good to have more NGOs. Yeah, it's good. Foreign or Chinese NGO, no problem. Same.
Especially because they can treat some sensitive issues, some problems.
Yes, can they have a lot of programs and help a lot of people, a lot of NGO. Yeah.
So yes.
One slide you say about the importance and cost of soft power cultural use, of use of culture as soft power. But if there is, and I try to read, and both of them are convincing. Even for me, the against argument are more convincing. But the idea is that if you want to develop something, it means that you think that it's good. Otherwise, you see what I mean? I mean, methodologically speaking, pros and cons are not at the same level. Because pros means that you want to continue, and cons means that you don't want to continue. So if you want to continue, that it implies that both of them are not equal, but that you support more pros arguments. See what I mean?
Then it's like when you want to do something, you write pros and cons to see what are your possible obstacles, what could be the risk, what could be the traps. So the intention is to develop it. But in order to develop it in a proper way, in a successful way, you have to see what are the risks, what are the possible downfalls of the strategy, and what are the strong points that you have. Right? So this was the
I mean, I understand in terms of strategy you have to make this sort of things, but politically, if you want to go on this sort of work, that means that when you make this strategy plan, you just try actually to manage the against argument in order to, because if you want to go on, that means that you think that you have to, so it's good in a certain way to do that. But strategically speaking, you must know what are the against arguments in order, not because you think that they're right, but just in order to overcome them.
To overcome the obstacles.
Yes, so that means that actually, in fact, they are not equal, but they are just the pros argument are the motivation, and the against are just the obstacle in order to fulfill the motivation. So it's not the same level exactly. And I have also another question about the nature of the soft power depends on the power itself that is beyond the soft or below the softness. So when you say Alliance Française and Confucius Institute, what is the difference? There is perhaps no difference in terms of the concept of soft power, but the only difference is the power behind this soft cultural. Perhaps this is the same. Strategically speaking, you're right to say it is the same agenda in French Institute and in Institute Confucius. Perhaps it's the same agenda in terms of soft power, but what is not the same is the power behind. Perhaps I mean this is the idea of what is the difference between between Japanese soft power and Chinese soft power for you, for example.
Yes, it's specific. intention of creating foreign cultural centers is specific from country to country. But if you analyze, if you do a strategical analysis of each foreign cultural center and the mechanisms in which way they are spread around the world, the ways, the tools they use are the same in the end. Just it depends on which country is it, what culture does it promote, and what is the power behind the soft power, as you say.
But how can you say that the mechanism is the same? Much more people from France can leave France to attend exhibitions in China than Chinese artists. Then on the other way, Chinese artists are not allowed very often to leave the country to do what they want to do. So there is a big difference behind those.
But this is not the strategy of the foreign cultures, the intention of the. We are speaking about the intentions.
But the intentions are not possible to describe. It's better to talk about facts.
I think, yes, but I think what you're speaking about, it's how does it work in practice, or what is the specific of each country, right? So, for example, Russia, if it creates Russian Dome, the content of what they offer would be completely different than the Goethe Institute. But the intention is the same in the end.
Yeah.
This is my opinion.
Yeah, I agree. But just so I agree. Practically speaking, I think that's right. My question was about how to, after that, to make differentiation in order to give way to make to disclose the power behind. So I just would like to know if in the way the strategy is done, even if it's the same purpose and perhaps also the same mechanism, in which way the differences of the power behind, for example, between a democratic or more or less democratic, even if the term democracy is very unclear, it's not actually more and more in all the world of this term has lost its meaning, but for example, what is this kind of differences after that, on this different kind of power disclosed through the soft power media, which is about the same? This was my question. And then, for example, between Chinese soft power and Japanese soft power, between manga and the things, what are the...
So you mean what is the difference in the methods, the contents, or the intentions?
I mean, politically speaking, how this kind of power behind are disclosing, but they cannot be disclosing openly because otherwise it won't be soft power anymore.
Yes.
So just about the directive between soft power and the fact that soft power is always power, and because the power are not the same behind, so.
Yes. So the question is, what is the difference?
I don't know, ask you. I just wanted to ask you this question.
Well, the difference would be, in my opinion, if the soft power is achieved, the influence of soft power is achieved, what are they going to do with it? What is the soft power going to be used for? For the support of what kind of development? Maybe this would then make a difference. But this is the next step after developing the soft power impact.
Thank you.
You're welcome. So, are there any other questions?
I'd just like to make a comment.
Yes?
Yeah, two things. One is the Confucius Institute and the other is NGOs of China. As far as Confucius Institutes are concerned, you can't compare Confucius Institute as Max Müller Bhavan of Germany or France from France. Because the problem is direct state interference in the academic freedom in the host country. That's the problem from the Confucius Institute. A state interference in the academic freedom which in the Western country we enjoy, which Confucius Institute won't allow. Second, Confucius Institute is just a tool for spreading, disseminating simple Chinese language, culture and things. They do not allow to go deep and go very deep into researching on Chinese culture or Chinese things. They don't sponsor it. Why I am saying this? This is on the basis of the director of a Confucian Institute in England, or basically Wales. He told me so. Because he's the director, he's a Western person, because as a director he knows. So they say no. They always say no if we want to go there. Third, in fact, Chinese government sometimes also wants to utilize Confucius Institute in knowing the Western teachers or media or societies' opinion on certain critical issues like Falun Gong. In fact, Confucius Institute also gave some money to research about the Western people's opinion on Falun Gong. Why the Chinese government will do it? Because they want to know. Of course they want to know. It's nothing. Yeah. So that way they wanted to do it.
Yes.
In India, Canada and Sweden, Confucius Institute would be certainly, at least in India, was not welcomed, because they didn't want, as I said, the first reason, that academic freedom of the West, will be infringed by the state, Chinese government state's infringement. And there are basic laws for Confucius Institute. You must not do certain things, talking much on religious or political or ethnic things. So there are set rules for that, which I can show you right now. NGOs. NGOs in China cannot be compared as NGOs in the West. NGOs in the West or India and the democratic countries have been a tool to criticize the government and not as a mere tool for the Chinese government. Because for setting up a Chinese NGO, you must have some Chinese government agencies, as a matter of fact. And they are known as mother-in-law, mother-in-law of these NGOs, these Chinese government agencies. Okay, so these are the things in the Chinese NGO and institutes.
Yes, I agree to one point. But as you said, they would like to get their opinion about certain aspects of Chinese culture. But I think it's legitimate. All the foreign cultural centers, foreign media agencies gather information.
No, sure, there's no problem.
Right?
I'm just saying that, yeah, these are the things.
My question is, why is there such a big scandal if it's Chinese gathering of information?
It's not gathering information, it's mediating. Suppose in my university, Jawaharlal University, we have already got a Chinese center to learn and do Chinese studies or language and culture. Why do we need a Confucian Institute? What was the need of that? Why? Because if you have a Confucian Institute within that university, then there is a lot of interference. There is a huge interference from the Chinese government, basically through the Chinese embassy. No, you can't do this, you can't have this, you can't have a conference on Taiwan, simply, which as an independent department, we would like to have. Okay? Like here, you have, yeah. So we say, no, thank you very much, thank you for your help. We understand that there is a need of a Chinese teacher from the Chinese from the China, but that we can have through other sources as well. It is not necessary that we must have a Confucius Institute. That is what Government of India and some think takers in India think. Not necessarily my view. This is what Government of India and in the beginning I was certainly, it was good that we have a Confucian Institute and Chinese teachers and things like that. I did support them in the beginning, but I was not a dean of the university or something like that. Yeah, but later on I also realized that there are certain other things which must be carefully trodden, because India and China are such a, nowadays, in present circumstances, such a sensitive issue.
I think we can discuss this for a long time.
Yes.
This is a very wide topic.
Yeah.
Maybe I would have to time to the next lecture. Or is there a break now?
Yeah, it's a break.
Okay, everyone, this is the previous. This is the professor just now. She gives the lecture in the